Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Kingdom of Dreams podcast, The Making of Stories. I'm your host, Jawad Mir again. Today, another repeat guest, screenwriter JV Hart. I had him last year, I think it was mid last year, for Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it was one of the most watched and listened episode of on our podcast to date. And today, I have him for Hook, which was directed by Steven Spielberg, starred Dustin Hoffman and Robin Williams. I love talking to JV Hart, which you'll find out in this podcast as well. He just has this amazing ability of telling stories, and I can just sit back and relax and get inspired and listen to him. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with screenwriter JV Hart. Well, good to have you again. We talked a few months back about Bram Stoker's Dracula. It was a great conversation. We had a lot of people watching it and listening to it, and today we're talking about Steven Spielberg's Hook, which I hadn't seen for a long time, and I just finished watching it this morning, so I woke up a little early just to kind of refresh my memory. And yeah, so we're here to talk about that. I really enjoyed it. I've read a lot about it, that how there's a lot of obviously, the budget was over, and Spielberg, even as recent as 2012, wasn't really happy with the way Hook came out. I don't know how much of it is true or not,
It's
but
all true. It's like when you said Steven Spielberg's Hook, I was going to correct you. It wasn't his Hook. It was Jake
okay.
Hart. Jake Hart, age 6-year-old Hook, and it didn't. Steven has gone out of his way to say, disparaging comments about it, in spite of its success. In
Okay.
fact, in
Well,
fact, in fact, I have the right here. I have the 1990 script that I wrote before Steven got involved and before Dustin and Robin got involved, when it was just a development deal that Nick Castle and I was on the back burner at Sony when we were doing it. So you can call it Steven Spielberg's Hook. He won't appreciate it, and I don't appreciate it.
I
It's a shame because all the people that worked so hard on that film, all the talent, all the crew, the distribution, marketing people who knocked themselves out for that film, and then he says he doesn't. He doesn't like it. Now you can be disappointed in your work, and he had a rough time making the film, a real struggle with the budget and the schedule, and in my opinion, he needed 6 more months with the script to totally make it his, you know. And I just read so there's a big interview that we did for the 30th, and I read a piece that's where Stephen was being interviewed, and he'd always wanted to make it a musical. Excuse me, he wanted to make Peter Pan a musical. That had been in his game plan for years. And he wanted to his first instinct for Hook was to turn it into a musical. And he actually had 5 or 6 songs written by Leslie Bricusse uh, and music by John Williams. And I read where he said he should have stuck to his instincts and made it a musical. So maybe that would have satisfied. The musical numbers that they shot didn't fit. It didn't fit the tone, you know. But I think if he had to go back and do it all over again, he would make it a musical.
right. Going back to what I was saying about Steven Spielberg's Hook, it wasn't in a sense that it's his film. It's more like you kind of come to terms with the marketing, the way films are promoted, like, Spielberg's Jurassic Park. It's just one of those things that kind of stays in our head. But I do feel that when I was watching Hook, I was just blown away by, especially among many other things, the production design, like the amount of work that went into the sets and the costume and the detail. I mean, I have never seen anything like that before. Even films like Pirates of the Caribbean, like, it's just not there in any other film.
Well, you can
Um,
see it. You can see it again in Wicked.
I
Uh,
haven't seen The Wicked yet. I haven't
yeah,
seen that.
John Chu was a kid when he saw Hook, and he's the director of Wicked, and that's among other films. And he's Filipino,
Hmm.
and Dante's role in that film inspired a ton of Asian young people that had never seen a young Filipino or young Asian actor in a big Hollywood movie. And he was so blown away by Hook. So, and Mark Platt, who produced Wicked, was at TriStar in those days, And if you see Wicked, he built everything. I mean, they built everything. Not a lot of CG. They built it, and it was and the production design was the on Hook was the brainchild of John Napier. Norman Garwood gets credit for being production design, but Steven brought Napier in to be and gave him visual consultant. It was the only film John Napier has ever designed. He's known for Cats, Les Mis, Sunset Boulevard, Starlight Express. I mean, he reinvented the Broadway sets as well. So when he came on the film, my wife and I were ecstatic. So were the kids because we had seen all of those shows
Yep.
and just absolutely loved Napier's work. So, and I couldn't wait to meet him. So when I finally got to LA, when Steven said, "Come on out," they were already in full blown pre-production, you know, and I got to meet Napier. We became great friends, and he said, "Come here." They had a workshop, and people were drawing and designing and sketching and what have you, and building models. And he took me over in the corner and said, I want to tell you why I'm doing this movie." He said, "Steven's asked me to do films over the years, and I kept turning him down." He said, "Then I read your script, this
Mm.
one. Then I read your script, and I started drawing in the margins designs, because the world you were describing I had not seen, but it made so much sense. So I'm here because of your script, not because of Steven Spielberg." And that stayed with me throughout the entire production. And the sets were staggering. Our kids spent the summer on those sets. It became a big deal in the business to get to go tour the Hook set. You get a special pass, and they'd ask certain people in the cast or the crew to give the tours. We had everybody from Prince to Bruce Willis to Kathy Rigby, who played Peter Pan, and I mean, every major movie star wanted to come to the set. Ricky Dreyfuss um, was there the day I was there, and uh, it, they were mind blowing to go to and spend time in. There was such detail and all kinds of places you could hang out and not be seen. The pirate town was staggering. Um, and I think Stephen that gave it that stagey musical kind of feeling, and I think that's what he was missing for himself was it should have been a musical. Um, to be quite honest with you, when my family first saw the film, they wouldn't speak to me for 2 days.
Really?
Uh, they knew what was missing in the script. They knew what had they knew this script, and they knew what was missing. Now the audience never knew what was missing, and it was a big lesson for me to the audience decides if we're a success or not the filmmaker, not the writer, not the actors, not the production design. The audience is who determines whether or not we're a success. And so when the family, we started going to the film playing here in New York in theaters and just go buy tickets and sit and be part of the audience. And the audience reaction was staggering. I mean, there were cheers and laughing and tears and applause at the end. Um, so my kids learned, as did my wife, Judy, that it's the audience. And Stephen made a great audience film. You know, thank God for Michael Kahn, his editor. Who would keep me abreast on how he was doing with the structure and what have you. The audience made that film a success. The audience made it a success today. It's 35 years old and it's still growing in terms of its audience. It's not gotten smaller, it's gotten bigger. And I think we're now in our third generation.
Mm.
I've got people that I've got people that grew up with my kids that are now married and have kids. So there's grandchildren that are seeing the film because their parents saw the film. And my daughter Julia, who's a director and writer in her own right, she's done 5, 6 films in the last 7, 8 years. Um, she and her husband, they have our 2 grandsons. She and her husband called us late one night here in New York and they're in LA. And she was a mess. And she said, Dad, I haven't seen this film in years. It's so different when you're a parent, and you have kids. It's a completely different experience. So Stephen created something that is universal, that is everlasting, that's forever young, and preserves the great Robin Williams performance, who's incredible in the film. Bob Hoskins, who became a great friend, they both did. Even my buddy David Crosby, the performances in that Robin gives, and Bob is sort of the glue. It's astounding. There was only one person who could play that part, and that was Robin. It's the only time I ever wrote a script with an actor in mind. If you couldn't get Robin, don't make the film. But the audience has continued. It blows me away. You saw it last night, and we're actually doing Jake and I, my son, actually, who had the idea for Hart, actually have a new Neverlands project that we're working on that we hope the BBC is going to let us do. Um, I'm going to shut up. You push my button, so.
It's okay. No, I'm glad you said what you felt because one of the things that you mentioned, excuse me. So when I saw Hook, I would guess probably 92, 93, a couple of years after it came out. It was, yes, it was like a children's movie, right? Like Peter Pan, obviously, I seen the Disney version that came out, I think in 50s or 60s. Um, but watching it this morning as a parent, I felt like I don't know why there is a dislikement for it, even many from anyone, whether it's the people on who worked on it or audience, because it has such. Hoskins and Dustin Hoffman for me were like I felt like they were Smee and Hook because that to me, I mean they've done amazing films. That was their biggest performance and the way they embodied themselves into the characters. Obviously, Robin Williams herself, that's an obvious, but it was just so well done. The music, the production design, the performances, the father-son relationship, everything. I don't know. I don't know why it's considered one of his least successful films by critics, by himself or whatever, but I think it's really up there. Maybe it's one of those films that's admired by time. But
Well, it has been admired. It has been admired by time. I
yeah,
mean, and
yeah,
it's wildly successful. It made a fortune,
yeah,
and its afterlife has been phenomenal. And you have to mention Caroline Goodall too, who played Robin's wife, who played Moira. It was her
yeah. She
first
was
big
amazing.
role, and
Yeah.
she's become a great friend, and she killed it. I mean, Stephen wanted to cast somebody that wasn't a movie star, that was a great actor, and he got Caroline. But you're right. It's and the critics did not like it. They reviewed the budget, I think, and it was the big Sony's first big splash in Hollywood, and it didn't open the way they wanted it to open. Globally, it did extremely well, and it's still doing well. The afterlife it's had is staggering. And I don't think it opened as way Stephen wanted it to open. I don't think it had the critical acclaim that he had hoped it would have. It was something that had been burning inside him for a long time, as well as me and Dustin and Robin. We were all fathers. Everybody had kids,
Mm,
and we'd grown up with the Disney version,
right.
and Mary Martin and Kathy Rigby and the Jerome Robbins musical. So to have a grown-up Peter Pan was a big departure, but it spoke to the fathers that we had all become. I would never have written it if I hadn't had kids. I wouldn't have had the idea if it hadn't come from my 6-year-old son then. So yeah, it's a very different movie when you're grown up. Yeah.
100%. You talked about it earlier when we talked about Dracula, and you just mentioned now. If you can sort of walk me through the genesis, which you just said that because of your son, and then how the script was not being purchased by studios. Just run that story
Yeah.
by me, just the pre stuff.
Well, the most of my projects have not been easy to get done. We talked about Dracula, how many years I was on that, 1977 to 1991, trying to get it made.
Right.
Um, we had Jake and Julia were 6 and 4, and actually Jake at age 3. I mean, when you have kids, Peter Pan and the Jamberry book and all the stuff about Peter Pan, uh, unless you're just tone deaf and blind, you introduce your kids to the whole idea of Peter Pan and Captain Hook and Neverland and Tinkerbell and Lost Boys, and So when I took Jake at age 3 to see E.T. Steven,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the first. I think Star Wars and then E.T. were the first grown-up movies he went and sat in my lap. And in E.T., there's a whole scene about Peter Pan, about the book. So we read the book. We introduced Jake to the whole idea of the story afterwards because he asked about it. Um, and we have a scrapbook around here somewhere. And one day Jake is doing one of those kid drawings, those 3-year-old drawings that's
Mm-hmm.
better than Picasso, but you can't sell it. Um, and we're going, oh, Jake, that's really cool. What is that? What's in a picture of? And he said, and totally identifiable. He said, that's the crocodile eating Captain Hook. And we went, oh, yeah, I can see that. I was like, and then he said, kind of conspiratorial, he leaned forward and said, but Captain Hook got away. The crocodile didn't eat him. And I went, whoa, Captain Hook is alive. And that began the whole stirring at age 3 about, okay, Captain Return, Revenge of Captain Hook. Captain Hook's not dead. What does that mean? And we kept going back and doing the same story. The darling kids go back to Neverland. It's the same, the same old, same old. And this is about 3 years, where I was trying to figure out and Stephen was trying to do Peter Pan too, so had Coppola, so had uh, John Hughes, the great John Hughes, wrote a script about Peter Pan in the 1940s during World War II. It was in the zeitgeist. Michael Jackson wanted to do Peter Pan. Um, it was in the zeitgeist.
Mm.
So, cut to age 6, and I'm in need of a job. I need a gig. I mean, I've written a couple things and nothing's really worked. I was a development deal junkie. And we used to play a game at the dinner table. Jake was 6, Julia was 4, called What If? And the What If game was we would take a fairy tale and stand it on its ear. What if the glass slipper broke? Or what if um, Prince Charming had bad breath and Sleeping Beauty didn't want to kiss him? What would happen if the ring didn't fit on Frodo's finger? What if Harry Potter was a bad magician? And only did bar mitzvahs and stuff. So we did that. We played that what if game and spin, stories. And Jake, one night at the table, said, "Hey, Dad, did Peter Pan ever grow up?" And uh, like the wonderful parent that I was, I said, "Nah, that's a stupid question. No, Peter Pan never grew up. He was the boy who couldn't grow up." And then, rather defiantly, Jake said, "Yeah, but what if Peter Pan grew up?" Dead silence at the table. And then boom, we all started riffing. I said, "Oh my God, that's exactly what the question to be asked. What if Peter Pan grew up?" And that night we cooked up a story. The whole family, Jake and Julia, they're creating, uh, and we figured that the worst thing we could do to Peter Pan was have him grow up to be a lawyer. We figured that would do it. He would turn into an adult. He would forget how to fly. He would stop believing in fairies. All the things, he'd become a capitalist and, like us and ambitious and greedy and, just an adult and a lawyer. So that night we came up with the bones of the story and I wrote a 5-page treatment, The Return of Captain Hook.
Mm.
And Captain Hook was going to come back and steal Peter's kids, which seemed the obvious revenge, you know. Uh, and cause that was because I had my 2 kids right there, which were the templates for Jack and Maggie in Hook. A lot of the lines and stuff came right out of our experience with them as kids, even going to London. Um, and I was terrified because Disney owned that territory. Peter Pan was all over Disney. Um, Plus, they had a whole franchise on the Pirates of the Caribbean. You know, that they owned that kind of pirate thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my agent about it at the time, and he said, "Wow, a grown-up Peter Pan." Hmm. So we pitched it all over town, all over every studio, producers, a ton of people, and everybody passed. Um, I didn't have a big profile then. I wasn't like a big deal. I'm not big deal now, but I mean the I didn't have a bunch of produced scripts. So I was like, well, it's a really good idea, Jim. But I had one executive, and it was a great pitch. I mean, it was very emotional, and uh, the story about losing your childhood and discovering it back through going in. And anyway, one executive said to me, "That's an incredible story, and I can see why you're so passionate about it." But he said, "I really don't think grown-ups can fly." That was his reason for passing.
Interesting.
And if I could have gotten up and flown out the window and said thank you very much, I would have. It would. But we got that over and over again, so it broke my heart, and I put it on the shelf, forgot about it. Liza Hallstrom was going to do a Peter Pan. There was another John Hughes was going to do it. So it was, there was word, oh, they're going to do it. You're too late.
Right.
And my kids and my wife would give me Peter Pan presents every Christmas and every birthday. It just drove me crazy. Yeah. Come on, stop it. Yes, forget it. And then when I had two producers, Gary Adelson and I can't remember, they're on the Craig, I can't remember the last name. I was writing a script for them at Sony. Um, and they asked me, said, "Do you have anything on your shelf that you love that you just can't get anywhere with?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And I took out my treatment, gave them my treatment, and they said, "This is fucking great." And they introduced me to Nick Castle.
Mm.
Nick had done a wonderful, very heartfelt film with The Boy Who Could Fly. It's about suicide, and I had loved, he also did The Last Starfighter, which was a very identical to the first script that I ever got to Spielberg and Frank Marshall back in '82. We never made it, but it was in that sci-fi vein. Nick read it and said, "This is great. Let's do it." Nick was like me. He had a better profile than I did, but he wasn't an A-list director. I wasn't an A-list writer. And this read very expensive. Um, so Jeff Sagansky, who was running TriStar, Nick had made a film there with uh, Gregory Hines called Tap. Modest budget, did well, and Sagansky said, "Yeah, I'll give you guys a development deal. Sure, here." Well, he threw us a bone. Not a lot of money, um, and just he was doing Nick a favor. So he and I disappeared for a year. Nobody knew what we were doing. My agent did. John Levin did. Uh, Nobody knew what we were doing. And at the same time, I'm doing Dracula, and nobody ever really passed on. We had that discussion. So I had Dracula and Hook that I was writing that nobody wanted to do for not a lot of money, and we were off the radar. So Nick and I had so much fun for a year. We had smoked cigars, we drank wine, we had good cognac, scotch. You know, I would go out and sleep on a friend's couch, and he and I would riff all day and into the night. And we finally came up with a draft. By this time, Sagansky was gone from TriStar, and Mike Mativoy came in, who had been a great agent and a great producer and been in the business a long time. So we figured we would be doomed, because usually a new executive comes in, they just clean house.
Yep.
So nobody even read the first script we turned in. So we said we want to do revisions. So and so we turned in this script to my agent John Levin, who flipped out over it, and he said, "This is amazing." And Mike Mativoy read it and went, "Wait a minute, what is this doing on the bottom of the pile of scripts that are in development? This should be the biggest Christmas movie of all time." And Nick and I didn't have the cred to suddenly fit that vision that people were beginning to have. So I didn't know what was going on at that time. I was barely able to make rent. I had to borrow money they paid us so little I had to borrow money to make rent. And we were actually out in Wyoming staying with friends who had loaned us money to, so the kids could have something to do. And I remember we were we're in uh, Jackson Hole, and we were eating lunch at Cadillac Jack's. I'm hoping the credit card goes through, you know. And in those days, you didn't have cell phones,
Mm-hmm.
and you had answering machines.
Mm-hmm.
So I would check in with my agent, with John Levin, once a week to see if there's anything going on. Can I get work anywhere? You know, and what I didn't tell you is while I was writing Hook and Dracula, the agency fired me. I was over 40. I'd not had a film produced. Uh, they really didn't see any. There wasn't really anybody there that wanted to keep me hanging around, except for John Levin. And uh, my lawyers tried to get me a new agent, and everybody in town turned me down. You know, old guy hasn't really, doesn't really seem to have be able to figure it out. You know, anyway, um, I went down the stairs to the phone booth to check in my entry machine, and in those days, you also had a telephone credit card. So you're going, yeah, put it on my credit card. You know, charge it to. You had a number, and the call went through. And usually, when I called my agent, it's always he's in a meeting. He'll call you back, or he's out of the office. He will try you later. This time, John got on immediately. I went, whoa. His assistant said, yeah, hold on. And we did the amenity. I started saying, hey, how are you? Know, and he said, a very, very important director wants to do Hook. And I said, we already have a director. We've got Nick. You know, are we making any movement on casting? You know, and he said, no, no, no. I'm telling you, a very important director wants to do Hook. And I said to John, well, if it's not Steven Spielberg, we've got nothing to talk about. And he said, that's who it is. You know, mic drop, phone, like, what? So I go back upstairs, and the kids are there, and Judy, they're all like, did John have anything, any news? You know? And I sat down and tried to hold it together and said, yeah, Steven Spielberg's going to direct Hook. And again, like, what? And that changed that changed our life instantly. I mean, it changed career, changed just because he was going to do Hook. And we were all like, wow, this is great. Because Judy, my wife, had always known that when Steven found out about Hook, he would drop everything and do it. They'd known each other back in the day, and that he'd stop everything. He was in the middle of Jurassic Park, and he was prepping Schindler's List. Put him on hold. And what I found out, the problem was now we had Nick Castle, and I'm torn and conflicted because I'm loyal to Nick. And they would probably said, I said they're probably going to bring a bunch of other writers in and replace me anyway, and we'll get our little deal and have our name on it and be happy. What I understood was that Medavoy liked the script so much, Levin took the script to Robin and to Dustin Hoffman. He literally, physically delivered the script to Robin. They committed before Spielberg. I didn't know that. They had said we're in, but they weren't going to work with Nick Castle. They wanted a big director. So my understanding is that Medavoy, apparently they had 5 directors they picked, and they were going to go to submit the script to them for the weekend. They had to make up their mind that weekend, yes or no. I don't know who the 5 were, but I know that Barry Levinson was one, Dick Donner was one, Steven Spielberg was one. I'm not sure who the other 2 would have been, but Steven was the top of the list. And I actually had written the script for Frank Marshall at that time, and it was still not, it wasn't dead, but we were still friendly and kicking around, and his assistant Mary Radford had taken good care of me, and Charles Vane was a producer on Nick and I's project, and he was producing for Steven as well. And Mary Radford kept saying to me, "I'm hearing a lot about Hook." I said, "Yeah, Nick and I are doing it, and we're having, we're gonna try to get it made. And she said, no, I'm hearing a lot about Hook. So when John Levin told me that on the phone, I didn't know any of this. And I mean, literally overnight, things changed. People at our kids' schools were rooting for us. They couldn't believe it was a fairy tale. It was unbelievable. Um, Steven and I had known each other back at the very beginning of his career when I first moved to LA. He'd met Judy through Joan Darling,
Mm.
wonderful actor, director, uh, performer. So there was a history with Steven. He also knew about the project I had written for Frank Marshall, the sci-fi project. Uh, so when it came back around, he didn't know it was Jake's idea. And we spoke one day on the phone. He called because they were already positioning me to be replaced. You know, I just knew it. Because I wasn't. I didn't mean anything. And they got rid of Nick, so why wouldn't they get rid of me? And in the call I had with Steven, I talked to him about the whole story of Jake, and he didn't have any idea that's where this came from. And I think it changed his point of view on this as well. This really had come out of our family, like him and his family embracing
Hmm.
Peter Pan. So they kept me around, gave me a big office. I went to work on rewriting the script with Bruce Cohen was our second AD, our first AD. Who, Stephen was giving, but they were already in full pre-production, and so they wanted a release date for Christmas. This was 91. This was 1990.
Hmm.
They wanted Christmas 91. So in the summer of 1990, they were already. I mean, John, everybody they were building sets. They had stages when they brought me in, and I got to work with Anthony Powell, great costume designer who'd been in a bunch of films with Steven. I got to work with John Napier. I got to work with all these incredibly talented people. And Steven was good about that. He just threw me in there. And he was he was really dismantling the script and trying to make it his. You know, that's when Malia Scotch Marmo came on. Dustin wanted his own writer. He wanted Malia to come in and rewrite his stuff. So Steven was sort of obligated uh, to have her have the same role I did, um, and add more access because of Dustin. Um, and it was pretty magic. I mean, I was working on Dracula, so the fact that they had other writers coming in and working on Hook, and I'd get the pages was okay with me. But the kids were over the moon. I mean, imagine being 6 years old and nine. They were 6 and 9 at that point. No, Jake was 11 and Julia was 9. Coming to LA on spring break and going on the sets where they all the MGM musicals were made, and you walk into Pirate Town in a pirate ship and and um, and the word spread very quickly that had been Jake's idea. So we had a jacket made for him that said creator with the Hook logo. And every day during shooting, when Jake was around, Robin would come up to Jake and bow and go, "Thank you for my job, Jake, son. Thank you for my job, Jake. Thank you for my job, Jake." So the word had spread through the whole production that it was Jake's idea. Spielberg let him on the set. He would sit behind him, watch him direct. He'd stay there all day. Julia was allowed to, but Jake is the one that really was the he took this opportunity as age 11 and soaked it up. He was allowed to go to dailies. Even the studio executives weren't allowed to go to dailies. Stephen really bent over backwards to make the family comfortable. You know, uh, I would get script pages every weekend for the next week's shoot that had been revised by Malia, or I think Carrie Fisher came in and did some dialogue for Tinkerbell.
Hmm.
Um, but I would get these pages from Kathy Kennedy from the office on Fridays, to review. And I would send Stephen faxes on Sunday night with notes. I got over the fact that I was, that I got over the fact that this is what happens. You get a bunch of writers in, you got a director who's powerful. Uh, he's trying to get it his way, and he's got to shoot every day. So, and I would point out things to him that I thought he was missing, or that don't forget this, or who you know. Um, and then Monday on the set, he would show up with my script pages with his notes on it and give them to Malia and say, "Go type this up for the shoot today," not saying anything about me. And at first I was pissed off, and then I said, "Wait a minute, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter where the good ideas come from or who has them, as long as it gets done. You know, it doesn't matter what about your ego or anything." So this went on for a while, and Steve would never acknowledge. She never said, "Hey, good job" or anything. Just, here, Malia, type. Here's my notes for the. And one day, Kathy Kennedy came in motion. She didn't. Come here, Hart. I want to talk to you. And Kathy Kennedy is formidable. I mean, she's done brilliant work with the Star Wars franchise, and I mean, just incredible what she's done. Uh, and I said, "Oh God, I'm in trouble. I'm gonna get decked or banned from the set or something." And she took me into her trailer and sat me down, and she said, "I know it's you." And I went, "I know it's you. I know what you're doing." And I'm going, "Oh fuck, so, yeah, and I'm going to get trashed." And she said, "Don't stop." And that was the end of the meeting. And that was the nicest thing she ever said to me, was "Don't stop." And because the production was out of control, Kathy and Frank were doing everything they could to keep it Jerry Mullen. I mean, it was a monster production. And he had 34 Lost Boys to deal with. It was a nightmare for Steven and a nightmare for the producers to even remotely stay on budget or on schedule. I just found my T-shirt, my Hook T-shirt for the 100th day.
Okay.
And we went 120 days. That was unheard of. And so much. I mean, it all felt very magical. But I knew from what I was hearing from Michael Kahn in the editing room that Stephen was not getting what he thought he wanted to get. And uh, I so appreciate and so admire what a director has to go through. I watched him and Francis Coppola in the same 2 years, and I watched two very different styles of directing. And I have enormous respect for what directors go through. I don't care if they have 10 writers or one or whatever they do, whatever he or she has to do to get the film made, I'm all for. I asked Steven, so what percentage of or do you get of what you want? And he said, when I first started out, I used to think I was getting 100%, maybe 90. And then a few years went by and I would settle for 70, you know. And then, these last few years, if I get 30% of what I want, I have to accept that. And I'm going, wow. And a year later, I asked Copel the same question. And he said every morning he wakes up when he's in the shoot and says, "Who do I have to fuck, suck, or blow to get the what I want on the screen today?" So I have enormous respect for what they go through and what they have to put up with to get on the screen what's in their mind and what's on the page. I'm going to have a drink now.
Wow. Sure, go for it. No, I love talking to you, Jim, because you just go telling a story, and I'm just sitting and taking it all in that I've never heard before. And it's just, being in the business myself, like I have my imagination going wild when you're using words to describe what's happening. I'm literally visualizing everything that you're telling me.
Yeah, so
And
am
I mean,
I.
that's it, and you're a screenwriter too, right? You're a storyteller. So I appreciate that because yeah, I'm taking on this journey and learning so much about Hook, but in terms of, and what's so fascinating is that life comes a full circle, that how E.T. initiated this and Spielberg directed E.T. and he ended up directing Hook. Isn't that amazing? Like that's just so cool, I
It
think.
is, and what we always knew, if I'd gone and pitched this to Stephen, I would have had to sign a release that they may already have something in the works, what have you. I hate
Mm.
those releases. If I'd have pitched it to him, he'd have said, "I'm already doing it. That's a great idea, but we're doing it." Um, and that was why Judy said if he ever finds out about it, he'll drop everything. So the fact that we had a script already, everybody thinks it was Steven's idea, or that hired me to come write it. We had a script that went in the hands of Robin, Dustin, Bob, Caroline, um, Steven, the agency. We had a script. So they already had something that was pretty good. I read it. I read this. You had watched the film. I read the script yesterday. Um, we created all that, So uh, it was as if the as you said the all the what is it, the forces of the universe melded into one,
Yeah.
whatever it is that Dustin says, or Crosby go, everything meshed. The forces of the age was right. I had kids was right. All of us were in our 40s or 50s. Uh, it was the right time for the movie, and it was not a Peter Pan we'd ever seen. It was blasphemy. I was told you can't do a grown-up Peter Pan. No, no, it's not. Nobody's going to. It's blasphemy. And I was treading on J.M. Barrie's sacred ground. And the J.M. Barrie experts, the few that got a hold of me after the film, that there's more J.M. Barrie in Hook than there is in Disney's Peter Pan. The authentic Barrie, it's down to little minutia that we mind with him. Even the last line, "To live will be an awfully big adventure." That's not
Yeah.
my line. "To die will
That
be an
was
awfully
Hook.
big adventure" is in the play that
Mm.
Barrie wrote. "To live will be an awfully big adventure" Stephen found. In reading the play, the very last thing Barrie wrote was that, no, to live will be an awfully big adventure. And my line was something like, "Today is the beginning of everything being," and Stephen found that line. And it is a line that has become a mantra to millions. Yeah. So the fact that he found that line, and why he doesn't like the film, it's that I'm not. I know what he went through, and that's probably why he went through the torture of the damned to get the film made. But he found that line.
Yeah. To me, Hook, when I remember, so I had moved to Canada in 1990, March 1990, and I hadn't seen Peter Pan or any of the Disney stuff. So when I moved to Canada, I remember I saw Hook first
Ah,
before I saw Disney's Peter Pan.
interesting.
And then I saw Peter Pan, and I'm like, is there like a prequel to this movie? Where is the prequel to this movie? Like the first part, and obviously it's not there. So I didn't know about Jane Barry. I didn't know any of that.
Yeah,
So for me, the world of Peter Pan was Hook
yeah,
first.
yeah. Robin told me a story after when Hook came out and everything, and even with a full beard, right, I don't know what he did next. He did some. Oh, maybe it's Awakening. No, not Awakening. Anyway, he did some with a full beard,
Um, Awakening, he did with full beard. That was Awakening for
and
sure.
he also the Matt Damon Ben Affleck, where he played the
Oh,
psychiatrist.
Good Will Hunting,
Good Will
but
Hunting.
that was later in the mid
Yeah,
'90s, I
later.
think.
But anyway,
Yeah.
he grew a beard for something, and we would get together. Our families became close, and he said that little kids would look at him, and he would think he was from one of his other films. And so the kids would say, "You're Peter Pan," And then we talked to them, same thing. They had not seen the Disney. They had not grown up on the Disney version or the musical. These are kids that live in other parts of the country. That
Yeah.
he was their first introduction to Peter Pan. You know, and
Yeah.
that got him too. That wow, that I I'm there. The grown up Peter Pan was their first introduction to the whole body of work that Barry did. You know, and in a way, it makes sense. I had when Bob died, our families had become, we're seeing them in London. We still stay in touch with the Linda and the kids and the grandkids. And when Bob died, they had asked me to come speak at his memorial. Bob died and Robin died 5 months apart. It
Yeah.
was a terrible year to lose both of them. And I was going to dive into Caymans and then fly to London to meet Judy and Hoskins to speak at his memorial. Um, and I'm going to the Caymans tomorrow. It's my Neverland. So and I got to the dive boat. I've known a lot of the people there for years. And I've been diving there since '08. And the head of the dive group, Sharon, says to me, you're gonna meet a Hook fan." Uh, he's a huge Hook fan. He's going to be your dive master. He can't wait to meet you. And I had been wrestling with what to do about Bob. What am I going to say about Bob Hoskins? Without losing it. And what can I say about him? And we get ready to load the boat, and this barrel-chested guy, about probably in his 20s, was shaped just like Hoskins, bald head, young vert, and he comes up on the boat, Mr. Hart, you know, uh, he was the Hook fan, and he told me the story that in those days, this is before streaming and all that stuff. He made his mother take him to see that film every weekend for 6 weeks
Wow.
when it opened, and she actually knitted him a sweater with the Hook logo on it that he would wear to the movies. And when it finally came out on VHS, he wore his VHS cassette out. So he was diehard. And Reggie, his name is Reggie, and we had a ball. We told stories. We would do Hook lines and stuff, and I said, let's call your mother. So we on the boat. We finally had cell phones. Uh, we called his mom and took a picture of us together holding I had something. I brought some Hook DVDs or something, and sent it. And he sent me a picture. She sent me a picture of the sweater that was obviously wouldn't fit him anymore. But
Yeah.
and that's just one of hundreds of stories that are related to Hook. And when you get that kind of interaction with the audience, whether you're right, he's the audience, Reggie's the audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so satisfying and rewarding and reminds you that you don't know what's going to happen when you put one of these things out there. Crosby used to say, you write a song, you put on a song, it's like a paper airplane you throw off the Empire State Building. You don't know who's going to land and who's going to read the lyrics. And over and over and over, and I think my kids started to see that. They started to see people gush over Hook and also what their role was in the whole thing. Um, but Reggie was one of those unique stories that just, I mean, we're still in touch. He moved to Canada. He's a wreck diver up there. We're still in touch, and it was all because of that movie. Yeah, over and over and over again, it happens. Yeah,
Well, that's you know, beyond any box office, any critical review. I've heard so many stories from so many people on this podcast, like how it impacts people. Even the films that, that I have directed, obviously not to a scale that you guys have worked on. When you hear somebody from an audience, thank you for making it, and this has made me feel like this and this and this. Like that's it. Like that's what what
yeah,
I think we crave for that. We crave for that appreciation. And it's so beautiful to hear those things because Hook, I mean, I do think Hook, because I saw it this morning again, it's like it has, I'm thinking about all these things in my head that, especially like, a guy who, it's basically all of us. Like when we're kids, we're very free and we express what we say, and then we grow up and we become very kind of like, by the society rules and everything. And then we don't live our lives the way we are supposed to be living. And that message in Hook is just one of the most, it's a timely message. I think will always remain there because we get wrapped up in the rat race in the world and society, and it's all about living your life and enjoying.
Well, then also there's. I'll tell you another one more story. In the
Please
film, in
do.
the in the script, uh, we created the whole in Windy Wing at the Great Ormond Street Hospital for Sick Children, which
Mm.
is where Barry gave his rights. So that there was a legacy of Peter Pan that would, the play and the characters supposed to generate revenues and royalties for the hospital. And part of when we were going to go to London for the royal premiere, I didn't realize at the time, but they were actually building a new wing to the hospital that they were fundraising for. And they couldn't believe that the film that I had created this whole fictional thing about Wendy and the hospital wing and all that. They thought that I had known what they were doing and did it on purpose. That no, it was all fiction. And so when we got there, the hospital wanted to give Robin and Dustin a tour uh, as part of it because the hospital we finally got them the rights to participate in the film. There was no deal with the hospital to make the movie. So the royal premier was going to give them £500,000 towards the new Windy Wing, which I had worked on very hard to make sure the hospital was taken care of. So the day of the royal premiere is also our daughter's 10th birthday, Julia, who was in London. My mother was with us, and all she wanted to do was go shopping to Harrods and Ham. She wanted to go do stuff the 10-year-old girl wants. She didn't want to go to her hospital. I said, no, we're going. They've made it, our family's all here. They're being very kind to us. We're going to go with Dustin and Robin, and we're going to go to the hospital. Well, it turns out it was an amazing, life-changing experience for Julia. Um, it's there's no emergency room at Great Ormond Street. It is a court of last resort. I mean, there's no you go there for treatment for cancer. They had a lot of burn victims from one of the clashes in the Middle East. It's an amazing hospital, and it's the first hospital where the parents could stay in the room with their kid. You could stay overnight.
Mm.
So they thought we were, the were the God's gift because we had put the Great Ormond Street Hospital on the map all over the world with Hook. You know, they made that connection. So we did the tour, which was amazing. And we got to the end of the tour, and there was a corridor called the Peter Pan hallway. A father had come in and done a mural years ago because they saved his kid,
Mm.
and it was jammed with 200 kids in wheelchairs, gurneys, canes, IV drips stuff, and nurses. And it couldn't have been. It was about 12 feet wide, maybe 20 feet long, and it was jammed. And we were just like, whoa. And I watched Robin take Julia by the hand, sorry,
It's okay.
and
You're getting
say,
me emotional too.
let's go. Let's work the room. So Dustin was there. Robin, it took an hour to go that 20 feet. And I watched Julia's life change on her face before our eyes. Um, there was one little boy that was in a full body cast, laying flat with his head down, where he could barely raise his head up. His IV drip was there, and he had a pirate flag on the IV drip and an eye patch. Yeah. And I watched Robin and Julia go over to him and talk to him for 10 minutes. And then Dustin went back a year later and saw the kid who was still in treatment, but he went back. And we were just like, God. And nobody said too much about it. It was everybody had to go run and change clothes to go to the premiere. Uh, and nobody said a lot about it, but there was a great empathy. The hospital people, Sir Anthony Tippett and Michael Samuelson and the board and everybody, they were thrilled that we had taken the time to go tour the hospital. And that night, Julia goes to the royal premiere with Jake, and she gets to go in a Rolls Royce with David Crosby and Jan, and Jake goes, and they get the red carpet treatment, and they're being interviewed on the red carpet, and everybody thinks Jake's Charlie Carsmo, so they think he's in the movie. It was Leicester Square. It was like huge, and the after party was at Harrods. Dodi Fayed had been our host while we were there. Dear sweet Dodi. and it's Julia's birthday. So for her 10th birthday, she's in Harrods at the Royal Premiere after party, dancing with Robin Williams, having all this fun. They bring her a cake. Um, Muhammad goes into the store and brings a big teddy bear out to give to Julia, and Jake goes, "Can he do that?" It's like it was incredible. So we get home like 1 in the morning, back to the hotel, and Julia and I are like, "This is her 10th birthday. What are we going to do for her 11th? How do we top this?"
Yeah, right, right.
She comes bouncing in at 1 in the morning wearing the same nightgown that Amber wore in the movie. Anthony Powell had made a special one for her. And she said to us, she was wide awake, that I have made a decision about my life. And we went, "Oh, okay." She said, "I didn't want to go to the hospital today. I wanted to go buy toys and do stuff for myself with my mom." And she said, "Today, I saw kids who may not have another birthday." And they were all smiling and laughing and excited. And she said, "Can I raise money instead of getting presents for my birthday and give it to the hospital?" And we just went, "Whoa, well, okay, why not?" So we came back to America and we started having screenings of Hook for her birthday. And she raised, I think, $1,000 that first birthday.
Wow.
And a year later, we're back in London for Dracula, another world premiere. And Judy calls Sir Anthony Tippett at the hospital, who was the general manager of the hospital, and said, "Listen, can we come by? Julia's raised some money on her birthday, and she'd like to give it to the hospital." And Sir Anthony said, "She did what?" He said, "She raised money on her birthday for the hospital. She did gave them presents." And he said, "Come by at 4." Judy and I was off on something else. Judy and Julia went to the hospital with a check. And when they got there, he had arranged a high tea for her. The board of directors were all there. The head nurses, heads, doctors, some of the kids for high tea. They treated her as if she'd raised £1 million. And Julie was going, "Wow, okay, this is cool." And Sir Anthony said, "Can you do this? Can you do this?" So this is no kid's ever done this. And they had a Peter Pan birthday club that was defunct and had some money in it in America. So he said, "Can you organize a charity around this kind of birthday giving?" So we said, "We'll try," and we did. Peter Pan Children's Fund. It's kind of defunct now, but for the next 10 years, we were in 100 hospitals raising money for, and the deal was the kid gave the money to their hospital, and they're a children's hospital in their community. You didn't go to Great Ormond Street. They wanted us raising money in the name of Peter Pan and the name of Great Ormond Street, but to make sure that the kid felt connected to the hospital in their community. And the hospitals loved it. Kid would show up with a check. They'd get a tour. They'd get a plaque. We had people that had Peter Pan Birthday Club rosters in their hospitals. So for about 10 years, we were in 100 hospitals all over the country, and even in Israel and Canada and Australia and Africa. And that again is another thing that came out of the movie. That spawned this whole philanthropy in children. Now you'll see a lot of children's hospitals have these clubs where kids are the ones that are raising the money and giving it to the hospital.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was another kind of thing that grew out of the film that was unique to our family. It was our experience that happened. It was our daughter, our son, that grew up with this project. And now my son is writing the Hook origin story with me. We've rewritten it. It was based on a book I wrote about young Captain Hook. And he's as old as I was when I wrote Hook. So now he's in his 40s having the same experience that he's grown up with. This has been part of his life since he was 3 years old. So it's the family curse and the family project. And, we're trying to do another version of the Neverland that's more adult and a little bit more dangerous and scary and horror, and it's got some horror in it. So a lot of stuff in Barry's never been dramatized or portrayed or even mined. It's in the book. Nobody ever paid attention to it. So anyway, I just wanted to tell you the story about Julia and the Peter Pan Birthday Club. Jake had the idea for the movie. She had the idea for the charity to connect the people to the hospital. And Sir Anthony's gone now. Michael Samuelson's gone. The people we worked with were all much older, but it was a real magic time. Julia was 10 years old, and until about age 17 or 18, she was actively involved. She was a spokesperson and everything.
That's quite incredible, and I really appreciate you sharing something deep and personal. And I can see what Hook means to you more than just a film. Obviously, you've made that very clear, and it's amazing. And when you were talking about the origin story of Captain Hook, as you were talking, the thought that came to my mind was there's a line in Hook from the daughter. What's her name? The character.
Maggie.
Maggie. Thank you. She said, "You need a mommy very badly."
Yeah,
And I am thinking in my head, if that line has something to do with what you're working on, I would be interested in seeing that. And I'm not asking you, I'm just saying what I think, what I was thinking. But is that something that's you said in the beginning was BBC? Is that the same project
no,
or?
that's the Neverlands. The Hook origin story we set up at Village Roadshow, and they've gone under, and so we're trying to get the rights back. We wrote the
Mm,
script the year after the strike. We spent on the script, and it follows young. I mean, in Barry again, it came from Barry. The last thing you hear Captain Hook say before he jumps into the jaws of crocodile is "Floreat Etona," which
mm,
means "May eat and flourish." And there's clues in Barry that he was a student at Eton, and Eton College is the oldest. It's a boys' prep school. It's put out captains and kings and lords and governors and for 5 centuries. And I went back and did some research. So that'd be cool. So Hook was so young. Hook, his name wasn't Hook. Young James was a student at Eton. How did he go from that world to becoming the most legendary pirate of all times? What was that journey? And I found an essay that Barry actually wrote, a speech he gave at Eton, because he was always asked by Eton people, did Hook go to Eton? What's the story? So he actually gave a speech in an essay called Hook at Eton, and it
mm,
followed an old man coming back to his alma mater without identifying himself. Nobody knew who he was, except he was what they called an Eton blood. He had his blues, his colors, his scarf, and what have you. And he came back to sort of take revenge on the school for how badly he was treated there. And he ends up burning the library down, so there'd be no record of him ever attending Eton, that he didn't exist. So he didn't want his bad reputation to further besmirch the school. So I said, okay, there it is, right there. Barry said he didn't die. You know, uh, he somehow escaped the crocodile and came back to Eton years later for the annual wall game between Harrow and Eton, uh, and that was it. We got to write a how he becomes a pirate, um, how he gets to Neverland, how why he when he broke bad and why he broke bad. You know, he was madly in love. He had a great love of his life that was taken away from him. And he kept losing things along the way that you would understand why he became the very complex character that he is. You know, and not to burst your bubble, but I didn't write uh, Captain Hook for Dustin Hoffman. That wasn't at all who I had in mind.
who did you have in mind?
Daniel Day-Lewis in Last of the Mohicans. That
Interesting.
charismatic. If you read Barry, he wasn't a foppish, buffoon kind of
Yeah.
over the top. That all came from the musical. if you read Barry, he was a charismatic, complicated matinee idol who had fallen from grace. Who was now stuck with these idiot pirates. But that he was educated, he you know civilized, and he was intellectual and daring and dashing. He's somebody that could actually convince your son to leave you. I never believed that Dustin could take Jake away from me. There was never any doubt in my mind that he would be somebody cooler than Dustin to win my son's allegiance. You know, um, but Dustin did an incredible job with
Yeah.
his interpretation of the character. But that's not who I wrote. So I wrote the book about young Hook to get that out of my system, to write that dashing, daring young Timothy Chalamet would have been a perfect young Hook.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know. But
Interesting.
that's what the book's about, and it's just three. It was going to be three movies. We'll see if we get to do the first one that follows him where he finally ends up in Neverland, and you have a whole different understanding of what happens of why he's in Neverland and why he's there. So hopefully you'll get to see that one.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna actually get the books that you were
It's
talking
not in
about.
print, but you can get it through Amazon. It's called Captain
Yeah.
Hook: The Adventures of a
Yeah.
Notorious Youth.
I'm looking at it right now, so I'm
Yep.
definitely gonna take a read at it. But is the Neverland story, just to kind of wrap things up, the one that you talked about BBC, is that something in the pre-stage or is
Yeah,
it
we
still?
uh, we we wanted to do it as a video game, so we contacted Kim McCaskill, who's a great gamer. I mean, she's a designer, great gamer, Scottish, lives in Scotland, and it's interesting. Again, Hook. I didn't know who she was, and she sent me a video on Facebook Messenger, and it was a video of a 10-year-old kid in full pirate gear standing in front of an outdoor screening of Hook. A lot they do it. It's a very popular film to show in the summer to parks and stuff. And this kid is right in front of the screen with his pirate gear on, his back to the audience, and he doesn't move for the whole film. She said he was mesmerized and stood there and watched the film, like the screen. And so I looked up who she was, and I went, "Whoa, this is who we've been looking for." She's a great gamer. She loved Hook. Went on and on about it. So Jake and I teamed up with her to come up with a TV series about the Neverlands that it doesn't have Hook or Pan in it. It's exploring more and more what the mythology is and kind of what the world that Barry had created. Uh, we hope we can do it at the BBC. We'll see. They've got it right now, and we'll check it out. We originally wanted to
Awesome.
do the Rufio origin story with Dante, but Steven said no. Everybody in Amblin loved it. I mean, right up to the chairman of Ramblin'. But Steven said no. It's anything that smacks of Hook. I don't think has a chance there. So Dante wanted to do the origin story with Jake as an animated series, so we could still use Dante's voice and keep him as young, as he was as Rufio in the film.
Yeah. That's amazing. I look forward to the Neverland and obviously the Origin Hook story whenever you guys are able to get the rights back, because I think this that watch rewatching Hook today brought back a lot of memories from the early 90s for me too, and just the idea of, and I learned something from it today. I really did. So thank you.
What did you
Um,
learn? I'm curious.
well, it's a very obvious thing. It's like you just gotta let go and enjoy life,
Ah,
but sometimes we get caught. I mean, it's not that I'm not aware of it, but it's just sometimes you get so caught up that you try to hold yourself back instead of letting go in some scenarios, right? So yeah, there was a lot there, and obviously the father and son relationship. I have a son who's 15 now, and that's the toughest age, as you can
yeah,
imagine, right?
yeah.
Right. So dealing with that, but trying to find the right balance of, being assertive, but at the same time being loving. So it's yeah. Thank you. Just wanted to say that. Thank you so
Well, I
much.
just got I just got something that came to me today. Uh, there's a pirate ship And the caption says, "Keep calm and be crazy. Laugh, love, and live it up because this is the oldest you've been and the youngest you'll ever be again." And I'm now old officially. So this was a good message for me to get.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And by the way you tell stories, Jim, you're not old. I'm just going to tell you that right now. You're not, you're just
Tell
so
that to my
into
body.
it. Well, yeah, I mean, but at least mentally, sometimes people get old mentally even though when they're young,
Yeah.
but you're still a kid. So I appreciate that. Enjoy Cayman Islands tomorrow. Um,
Now, if
and
you don't have to do anything with this, but if you want, I'll send you the 1990 draft of the script.
I would love to read
It's
it,
in.
and I'll
It's
keep
in.
it confidential.
I had to scan it in sections because my scanner's not big enough. Um, a couple of people asked me for it, and I don't know how you feel about this, but if anybody wants it, they can make it. If they make a donation, a tax deductible donation of like $25, I can email it to anybody who's interested in doing that, and I can tell you the charity that I would like to see supported. I don't know
Perfect.
what your structure is or what happens to your podcast or if you ever do anything like that.
Honestly, Jim, all we can do is we can put it in the description when we post it on social media. We can whatever links that you want. I have no problem doing that. It's
Yeah,
not, would love to do that because I would love to read it myself too. And I'm
I'll
sure
send it to
there's
you when we hang up. I'll send it to
people
you.
out there. Great,
Yeah.
awesome. And I'm gonna bug you about something else down the road because that story of the obviously we're gonna talk about contact sometime whenever you're available. But the fan of Hook that you were
Reggie,
talking about, who's in Canada, Reggie, I'd love to
Reggie.
have him on. I think it would be
Ah,
interesting.
he's great. He's great.
Yeah.
He'd be a kick in the head for him. You know. Yeah, he left the Caymans and moved to nice cold Canada.
Which part?
I'm
Do
not
you know?
sure I think it's the Northeast. He's a wreck diver, so he dives in cold water. So I think
Oh, it's
it's either Montreal or it may be even further. It may be further east.
Nunavut, maybe Nunavut, or East, or like East Coast. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
Halifax,
Well,
something like that. So
yeah.
let me know when this is done.
Yeah, no, we're probably gonna put this up in a day or two. If you can send me the link of your charity and everything
Yeah,
that you need, we can put it up in the description. Just whatever
yeah.
you need, we just copy and paste it.
Okay. And so what is your you said you had more viewers on did you ever whatever the last one we did with Dracula, was that what we did? So
Yes.
what is your reach?
Um, in terms of the reach, I'll be very honest with you. With our audio podcast, we get about 2,000 downloads per episode.
Right.
With our YouTube, it's dwindles. YouTube is just sort of there as a complimentary thing. So with Dracula, we got, I think, close to the main conversation we had about 8,000.
Right.
And then we made two clips out of it. One of them almost hit 10,000. And the others are sometimes in 1,000 or 800. Sometimes they're 200. So it just varies. We try to
But
promote it
this
as
but
much.
this is just audio then.
No, this is we're gonna put it up on
Oh,
all of them.
okay, okay. All right.
Spotify, Apple, YouTube.
Oh,
And I
okay.
think,
I didn't see
yeah,
anything. Oh, it says recording. I see it. Okay, yeah. Yeah.
yeah. It's a recording. So, but yeah, no, yeah, I loved it. I absolutely loved every second of the conversation with you, and I loved it with Dracula. And I was anticipating something exciting, and it was beyond my expectations. So I appreciate that.
Well, you got me wound up. I think maybe because Hook is in the air again, with all of the with what's going on with Neverland. Just like Nosferatu brought Dracula back, the success of Nosferatu has had a huge impact on Dracula.
Yeah.
Spawned a lot of comparisons and people going back and watching Dracula and wanting to chat about it, what have you. So we like this. Thank you for keeping me young for an hour.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. We'll talk again, I'm sure. Well,
Yep.
enjoy your health.
Thank you, sir. And I'll let Reggie know
Thank
you're
you.
going to be looking for him.
Absolutely. Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Bye-bye.
Take care.